Hello, welcome to the Finding Your Path podcast. Hope today finds you well. My name is Stefan, and my goal with this podcast is to dig a little deeper and find what brings people joy and how they define it. I believe finding joy in what you are doing is the secret to improving and bettering your life. My goal is to talk to as many people as possible and find what brings them joy.
One of the things when you look at history, it's very much like everything else. The more you look into it, the more you realize you know nothing about it.
On today's show, me and my good friend Christian discuss the importance of history and what we can learn from it. We also discuss woodworking and how our paths have changed since college. Let's dive in. All right. Hey, buddy. How's it going?
It's going all right. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, of course, man.
Yeah. So I'm trying to kick this off with a really deep question to start off with. And Perfect. Let's get right into it, eh? All right. So how do you define joy?
How do I define joy? I guess joy is almost like not like, I don't want to use the term out of body, but almost like an out of time experience, you know, when it's just like everything that's causing you problems isn't causing you problems. Okay. And the thing that you are doing is bringing you excitement and bringing you, or maybe not even excitement, but bringing you just bliss.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So what it kind of sounds like is like you almost wait to get into the flow of something, and then that's when you're having like a joyous moment.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's crazy because like I was listening to a couple of Stoic videos this morning.
Okay. Yeah.
And they kind of talk about as like you have to work. I mean, this isn't necessarily what they talk about, but this is how I interpreted what I was listening to.
Absolutely.
So they have a similar definition of being in the moment where it's just like you kind of get lost in it and it kind of flows through you. And then myself, I was thinking where it's funny how if you try and look for joy, it seems a little bit counterintuitive because to be joyful, it's something you experience, so you don't really think about it at all.
Right.
So for me, I'm always thinking like it's almost like a fine balancing act you have to do. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of come up with this method, like almost like a switch method, that you kind of turn on your brain when you need to, like when you need to solve a problem. That's when you use your intellect or what have you to solve this problem. But then when you don't need it, like if you're just relaxing, watching TV or hanging out with your friends, like there's not much to think about. Just turn it off and enjoy the good time. Enjoy being around your friends, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah, and like that's the crazy. I'm shaking a lot.
That's all right, man.
Hold on. All right. Yeah. Perfect. So, yeah, man, that's awesome. So I hear like you also enjoy woodworking. We were talking a little bit before this started.
Yeah.
So like, what is it about woodworking that you really like?
I suppose this is going to sound very odd, but the process of creation.
The process of creation. Man, that's crazy. Go on, elaborate on that.
Yeah. It's the idea of you seeing maybe an image in a book or online and thinking to yourself, you know what? I can do that.
Yeah.
Right? And then you apply yourself, and sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes it does. And when it does, it's great. And when it doesn't, that can be great too, right? Because it's like you've learned. Okay, well, you know, maybe I can't do this right now.
Yeah.
Right? But that doesn't mean I can't keep trying. I can't keep putting effort in.
That's
to doing that.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds very much like you turn everything into an opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's something I've been thinking about myself lately. Actually, is kind of just turning things into anything that you can learn from. Honestly, and something else that I've kind of runs parallel to that idea is going from a consumer to a creator.
Exactly.
And I was thinking, whenever I heard creator, I always thought YouTube, podcasts, all this stuff.
Sure, yeah.
But now I'm thinking, like, as soon as you like take on a challenge yourself and accept whatever consequence may happen, you become more of a creator than a consumer. Now, this is going to sound like maybe a little bit like holistic and like natural medicine, for example, but for me, I started this stretch routine because I got fed up with this pain that I have in my ankle.
Okay.
And I feel good because it's like I'm taking control of that pain, you know? Like I'm like, my first reaction isn't like, oh, let's go take a Tylenol or even let's go to the doctor, not discrediting doctors at all.
Yeah.
I think it's more in line with me and being like, I want to try and figure this out myself before I ask for help.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, man, yeah. I totally get it when you say like, it just, you feel something or you feel good when you're woodworking because you're creating.
Yeah.
And then you're learning from your mistakes. And I love that, man. That's great.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And so what first got you into woodworking?
I guess it was back in high school.
Oh yeah?
And it was just it was just originally just a class, right?
Right.
And then, you know, you start learning about the different tools. You start learning about how to properly and safely work with different pieces of lumber, and you start to understand, and you can see all the possibilities for its use.
Right.
You know? And yeah, I guess it just kind of, I mean, I wouldn't say like I'm an avid woodworker, right? But like, I mean, I built a arrow stand for when I was doing archery more often. I remember I built a bench that has been left at my old house.
Okay.
But I mean, you know, the new people seem to like it, so good on them.
Oh, that's
right?
good.
Yeah. So
do a monthly checkup on your bench.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah. No, like honestly, if I made a bench, I'm like, I'd want to make sure people are taking care of it because I'd imagine that took a while, right?
Yeah, it didn't take as long as you'd think, but
okay.
I mean, it was a very simple bench, just very utilitarian. Just, you know, okay, it's a place to sit to make sure your butt's off the ground, right? So that was about it.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, like, and the thing that's kind of striking me is like, you looked at wood, and you almost saw like a creative outlet, whereas. Like, obviously, like, for other people, they might look at wood and be like, that's just wood.
Yeah.
And, like, that brings a memory to me about, I was talking to my friend, and he was in third year accounting at the time, and I asked him, I'm like, hey, what's up? Like, what are you learning? And he's like, oh, this is probably going to be really boring to you. I'm like, oh, shoot, like, what are you learning? And he's like, okay, so my project that I have to do is... they gave us like this fictional site and we have to build a building in 3 days or like a building in like 3 months or something. And we need the permits here. We need to get like the proper measurements of like where the building's going to go, how big the parking lot's going to be, all this stuff. And he's like, I know it's boring stuff. I'm like, no, man, that actually sounds like so much fun because you have to solve a problem.
Yeah.
And you have to be super creative with that problem because even he was saying, he's like, yeah, like sometimes like deadlines don't get met and stuff like that. I'm like, that sounds really fun. And I could tell by talking to him that he enjoyed it. And like to him, I think to him it seemed boring because he was thinking what other people would think when he said that, but for himself, like, he enjoyed it. Like, that was his, like, woodworking, you know, his creative outlet.
Yeah, that's fair.
And that to me is crazy, just thinking about how anything could be a creative outlet for anybody.
Yeah. It also might just be that it's because he's living it, right? So
that's very true.
So if you're living something and someone comes up and says, "Oh, what do you do?" And it's like like he said, "Oh, it's like I plan out I plan out areas of where we're going to be building." People are going to be like, "Wow, that's crazy!" And you know, in your head, it's, you know, something you do every day. So it's not it's not that, you know, the amazingness kind of just
the novelty wears off.
That's the word. Thank you. The novelty wears off. Yeah. So
oh, it's crazy. And like I was I've been thinking about it a lot, because like if I'm out with my girlfriend and stuff, she'll say certain things like, okay, let's say we're ordering food, right? And she's like, oh, they messed up my lettuce, or they forgot the lettuce on my food, they forgot the tomato or whatever. And she's kind of, you know, having a reaction to it, a negative reaction. And I'm just like, well, like, to you, it's this important thing, which is fair enough. Like, you pay money, you expect a certain level of service. But to them, like, this is their day-to-day. Like, to them, it's not really important. Like, oh, I forgot to put tomatoes on your food. I forgot the lettuce, you know? And, like, I think that speaks to just the mundaneness that you feel when something becomes day-to-day. But I also think, like, that mundaneness is, you can use that in itself, like, to guide you and be like, hey, maybe this isn't right for me if I'm feeling this bored every day, you know?
No.
So, something else that's, like, really fascinated me ever since we became friends
all right
is you have this ability to get me super excited about history.
Oh, all right.
And for me, like, thinking about it now, it's just like, because like your whole I don't know, like you seem to get like light up a little bit, and you get a little bit more excited when you're talking about it.
Okay. Yeah.
And yeah, I was just thought it's like really cool how like I try to learn history on my own.
Yeah.
I try to watch videos, read books, what have you, but I can't. I can't. Yeah. But then I hear you. Yeah, I hear you talk about it. I'm like, I'm pretty jazzed up.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm well, now I'm starting to think like, well, no, he has a lot of joy in learning about history and all of that, which is amazing. So, thinking about it, I just want to know, like, why do you have such joy learning about history?
I suppose it's about learning about where everything came from.
Huh.
Right?
Okay.
So if you look at a road, right, you see what? You see either gravel, or you see pavement or asphalt or something. And you think to yourself, well, what did this look like in my father's time, right? Or my mother's time? And you know, you can pretty much guess, well, it probably looks about the same, right? Well, what about my grandparents' time? It's like about the same, maybe a little different. It's like, okay, well, what about my great, you know? You keep going back and keep asking, what did this look like?
Yeah.
In my ancestors' time, right? And it's like, okay, well, it probably was, say, you know, at some point, you know, maybe not over here, but at some point in history, that they were on like cobblestone roads, right?
Right.
And I'm just using. I really chose the most boring example of roads, but I mean. And you want to know where those roads went, right? Before they were paved over, what the people used the roads for. Obviously, it was for travel, but where were they going, right? And who was using those roads? Because it wasn't just the people around. It was the traders and the people from out of
the state. I
suppose. Yeah, either state, country, or even kingdom. If you go far back, or even go further back, the empire, and you learn about who interacted with who, right?
Right.
That's the important part. We often think that certain peoples were almost segregated from each other, but if we look hard enough, we find out that the ancient world was actually quite well connected, and they traded different technologies, and you want to see the path that led to where we are today, right? Wow. So I guess sorry, I know I'm pulling different ideas, but I'm just
go for it.
I mean, it's about it's about learning about everyone, right? You want to learn. I want to learn about just what shaped, essentially what helped shape me, right?
Right.
So to do that, we have to look at the past.
Yeah. And that's crazy, because from hearing you talk, it sounded like you did a bunch of world building, you went from roads to merchants and kingdoms and how they formed. And that's fascinating, because that's kind of how I get when I get really into something, right?
Sure, yeah.
You start with one little thing, and then you pop off, honestly, and learn everything about it.
Exactly, yeah.
And to me, that's crazy for self-improvement. You just need to take one step, and start. It doesn't really matter where it is, but just take one step and then keep going. They can be little steps, they can be big steps, what have you. But for me, what I found is when I started to improve myself in a certain aspect of my life, then I would look at let's say my room, for example, and I would say this is too messy.
Right.
And that's something I would say to myself, but deep down I knew what it was. And to me it was I feel because I'm living, or I'm trying to reach my potential in this other aspect of life, I look at a messy room and is this really the best I can be in this situation? And I say no, it's not. So to me, it's by, I said, doing that one thing, it's kind of almost forced me to improve other aspects of my life.
Yeah.
And that's phenomenal, man. I love the world building you did there.
Thanks.
And sticking on that for a second.
Absolutely.
Have you learned anything about finding joy or peace by looking into the past and studying history?
Yes, a little.
Okay.
One of the things when you look at history, it's very much like everything else. The more you look into it, the more you realize you know nothing about it. Right on. I mean, the more I look into history and I see which peoples interacted with which, you realize, oh, holy crap, there are more people than I there were more different types of peoples than I thought there were.
Different groups?
Different groups and different different tribes and different and this is even just going back to the days of ancient Rome when it was a kingdom, right? You look back at that time and you're holy crap, there's a lot of peoples I don't know about, right?
So many people, man. Too many people. I was actually watching the History of Rome, I believe the podcast was called.
Oh, okay.
It was one you recommended to me. Yeah, that
Mike
one.
Duncan, yeah.
And
that's great.
I just watched maybe 2 episodes. I'm I swear he just threw 20 names at me, and they all sound super regal.
Yes.
And I feel they are important, but I'm I already forgot them all.
Yeah. He. The funny thing about Mike Duncan It is often said that Herodotus is the father of history or the father of lies because he just recorded down everything.
Father of lies?
Father of lies, yeah. Because so he'd write down absolutely everything that someone would tell him, right? And then he'd say, "Well, it's not my job to discern if it was real or if it was fake. I'm just writing down what they told me. Like this is what I'm recording."
Right.
So he's often seen as the, again, father of history, father of lies, and Mike Duncan's usually called the grandson of history because he's brought back this ease of access for history. He's kind of the one who started the whole history podcast.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
History podcast format.
Yeah, because I was looking and most of his episodes are barely like 20 minutes long.
Yeah, I believe the earlier ones are. I think a lot of people want to keep to 30 minutes because that's usually the commute time. So they'll try and condense down whatever they can in that one, whatever the idea is in that form of a episode.
And here I am shooting for an hour. All right, but yeah, so I already forget his name. Not Mike Duncan. The father of lies.
Herodotus.
Yeah. So why was he considered the father of lies? Because it seems like his process was very object.
It's because there are instances in his writings where he says that during something would be happening, and then he's like, "Oh, and by the way, a soldier said that there was a flying snake," right?
Okay.
And he's saying. People are saying, well, that can't happen, right? There's no such thing as flying snakes.
Enough,
and Herodotus is saying, look, I'm just the messenger. I'm just writing down what this guy told me. So it's not it's unbiased. He's not saying that, well, this guy seems to be exaggerating or something. He's just saying, this is what this guy told me. So he's more perpetuating a lie, right?
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess that's that's the duty he chose to do, right? Because he's just a scribe essentially.
Right, but he's he
Yeah.
I mean it's you could spend the whole podcast talking about
oh no, for sure.
I mean, yeah, he's an interesting fellow. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he sounds very interesting. And the thing, like, hearing you speak about history and everything like that, what it just brought up for me is when I look at history, or when I think about history, I just think of a pattern that always repeats itself. Like, I've kind of given up the notion that life is linear, and I'm kind of like, life is cyclical.
Okay.
So
I understand where you're coming from, but I mean, well, if you don't mind me putting in.
Go ahead.
Just from what I understand, I don't think it's so much cyclical, but it's more of a spiral.
Okay.
So it's I think it was Mark Twain who said, history does not repeat itself, but it sure likes to rhyme.
Oh.
So I don't think because obviously history doesn't repeat itself, but I mean it comes pretty damn close.
Yeah,
right?
Like I never took that metaphor like literally. I just meant like you'll find, for example, something that's happening now compared to the past and be like, that's like an 80% match.
Right. Yeah.
And like I think having that kind of like match is good enough for like, okay, if I study this situation that happened in like, let's say the 1600s and apply it to, and like try and figure out a solution or what they did.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like you can apply it to today, right?
Absolutely. We can absolutely do that.
And like that's the phenomenal part of I find about history. And that's the one thing that always kind of keeps that little fire alive where I'm interested. I'm just not like interested enough to like delve deep and go from the cobblestone to the kingdom, you know?
No, absolutely. You know what? I think it's just how certain people think, right?
Exactly.
Because math, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have never been good at math, and I have never been... How would I put it? No, basically just I've never been good at math, but I understand how useful math is.
Right.
And I mean, to be one of those people who are just, who just love math, who love math as much as I love history.
Mm-hmm.
That would be incredibly beneficial, right?
Mm-hmm.
Incredibly beneficial. But I can't get into math, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's just how my brain works.
Yeah.
That's it.
No, that's
right?
awesome.
So,
and that's great that you figured that out. I've been watching a lot of Ray Dalio videos lately.
Okay.
And Ray Dalio is a hedge fund manager now, but he's considered one of the greatest investors ever.
Okay.
And one thing he said, one of his principles, was surround yourself with as many different kinds of people as you can,
mm-hmm.
and make sure that if you don't know something, if you have an area of weakness, have someone in your group
mm-hmm.
that's their area of strength.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I think that's great. That's phenomenal, because that way, you guys are all building towards the same goal, but also covering for each other.
Yeah.
In times of need, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's the perfect way to live life in synchronicity, in harmony, is realizing okay, I'm not good at math. Mm-hmm. I'm not good at history. Mm-hmm. But for example, you're great at history, so whenever I need to talk about history, I go to you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And I think just acknowledging that in ourselves, that we have stuff that we're not good at, mm-hmm. and realizing that someone's better, mm-hmm. is super helpful, because mm-hmm. we can stop looking at them like our rival in something, and be like, mm-hmm. hey, can you teach me? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's key. That's another thing that's been bouncing around in my head, is looking at the world as a mentor, mm-hmm. and a teacher. Mm-hmm. And I find the world's a lot easier that way. You're less stressed and everything.
Right.
But man, that was great. What other, do you listen to philosophy? Do you read philosophy, anything like that?
I probably should.
Yeah, it's always kind of surprised me that you haven't.
I probably should, but I don't know. I've kind of I am open to different worldviews, but it's almost like I have already found
what works for you.
What works for me.
Yeah, and that's great.
And yeah,
that's phenomenal, because what I've started to do, as of last week, is on Saturday, mm-hmm. I just listened to a bunch of videos talking about Stoicism. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And on Tuesday, I just listened to a bunch of videos that talk about Taoism. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because again, I've looked at a lot of philosophies, a lot of great ones. To be honest, they all kind of say the same thing in different wording. That's the way I look at religion. I look at philosophies.
Okay.
But the ones that really strike me as this is me, mm-hmm. would be Taoism and Stoicism.
So sorry, you said that that philosophies all are trying to. Sorry. Could you say?
Yeah. Sure. So with philosophies and religion, the way I kind of look at it is they all have the same goal in mind.
So that's what I was going to ask, is what goal is that?
So for me, again, this is my putting my subjectivity to it.
Absolutely.
Would be that achieving that goal of peace.
Okay. Yeah.
And calmness.
Sure. Okay.
One philosophy that I really got into was absurdism, and Albert Camus proposed to be wary of physical suicide and philosophical suicide.
Right.
So, and do everything in your power to avoid those. And my interpretation of it, and by avoiding those and by consciously trying to stay away from all that, you'll live your best life. Because by like intellectual suicide, he meant, you know, like don't get like stuck in a rut and like think for yourself, you know, like explore different ways of thinking. And then from that, discern what's best for you.
Right. Okay.
And I think that's phenomenal. And for me, like you found what works for you. I found what works for me. And like, I think that's a big problem. Like a lot of people don't really know what works for them. They're like, what's it called? Like taking shots in the dark.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know. Eventually, me personally, I got a little fed up with that.
Fair. Yeah.
And, so I guess, another question I'd like to ask, like, was there ever a point that like you, in your life, that you can look back and be like, I'm fed up with this and I need to change something?
Yeah. Constantly.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how I'm living.
Okay.
Damn, that one hit harder. That was a harder hitting question for sure. Yeah, that's constantly. I mean, it's I don't even know where to begin with that.
No, that's okay. That's okay. The reason I ask that is because ever since we've been friends, I find that we, at least in our friend group, we've always had more of a contemplative way about us, where we'd always be thinking about, like, you know, what's like, for a lack of a better word, ailing us,
sure,
or something like that. And for me, what changed is eventually I realized, like, I'm overthinking a lot of things, like a lot of things, you know, and like I would go too deep with my realism, bordering on nihilism.
Right.
And like circling back, like that's why I'm like focusing in on those two philosophies that work for me. I'm like, that this is it. Like this kind of gives me peace,
right?
And clarity. And like even that is a bit of a worry to me, because I don't want to get so deep into it that I cut off other points of views.
Right.
You know? Because that's kind of like the scientific method.
Sure.
Is like, can it stand up to questioning? So, yeah, sorry, I kind of went off there.
No, that's okay, yeah.
But yeah, and I kind of go to it like, okay, I'm like, this is what makes sense to me now, but I'm also open to the change. Like, for example, I don't like history now, but like maybe 5-10 years from now, I'll look at history and be like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. And I might become a history buff because it'll be what makes sense to me and how I understand the world at that point. Sorry, I hijacked that question.
No, that's okay. That's fine. I mean,
floor is yours, friend.
Yeah. So I mean, in terms of like I said before, in terms of philosophy, I feel confident about myself. I'm sure my philosophies will change as I get older, and I'm okay with that. But in terms of I guess wanting to change something about myself, yeah, that's constant. Like, so I'm also trying to learn everything I can, but
awesome.
Mine is more, I suppose, physical.
Okay.
So I am trying to make myself as useful as I can.
Okay.
And I'm trying to, you know, so like I said, you know, I do a bit of carpentry, but I want to try and learn more about, like, say, plumbing and electrical and just understand, you know, more about computers, become more computer literate. I know you said you wanted to do yours. I know you said you do stocks and forex, right? Yeah. So, and I'd like to learn more about that as well. But in terms of say, like, philosophy, I feel comfortable where I am right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And like, I don't know, this is probably like just me and the way I apply things now. Just like, as long as you're learning something, I think you're growing as a person.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter what you're learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I just got the piano.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was like, when did Stefan start to play the piano? Like,
yeah, I just got that on Tuesday.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm like thrilled because I looked up Mary Had a Little Lamb on YouTube. And it was kind of like Guitar Hero kind of stuff where like the buttons come down.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I played it. I'm like, I'm playing Mary Had a Little Lamb right now.
Yeah.
You know, I got so excited.
That's great.
But like, you tell that to other people, like, okay, you can play a kid song.
Yeah.
Like, play this other song.
Exactly, yeah.
And this is something else that's been like going on in my head is we're a very outcome-based society.
Sure, yeah.
So with that example, like I'll tell people like, oh, I'm learning piano. They'll ask me, what do I know?
Yeah.
Like, Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Yeah.
Even that, I barely know it. But they'll like have this look like, oh, okay. It's like, man, I'm just starting out.
Yeah.
You know, we all have to start somewhere. And I think that's kind of bad for society, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a, I believe it came out of a product of necessity, right?
Okay.
I mean, you know, if you think back in terms of history, right? If we look back, I mean, of course, societies back then would have to be based around outcome, right? So if you went out for a hunt and your tribe was starving and you came back with nothing, and then you said, well, but I learned something. It's like, yeah, but that doesn't
put food on the table.
Yeah. Right? So, I mean, it was I think we just haven't reached a point where that's not a necessity yet. Right?
Yeah. I think we're honestly stuck in that way of thinking a little bit because we don't really have that urgency. And like in the example you gave, like we don't have to hunt for our food. We go to the supermarket, you know? So like we can turn off that kind of valve in terms of, oh, okay, yeah, you might have learned like a cool way to like sneak through the forest, but where's the meat?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
And like now I think because we don't have that urgency, like we don't really need to hang on to that way of thinking as much. And this goes like back to what I was saying, like we need to realize how to turn on something when we need it and then turn it off when we don't. You know? And like that's that's kind of where I stand on life now, and definitely how I've changed since I was younger. Is I used to think like there was this one size fits all thing, like method to life, but now I'm starting to realize like, well, it depends. It depends what situation you're in, right? A concept in Stoicism that I got from it is like have your emotions, but have them for like the right time in terms of obviously the situation and the length. Where, you know, it's like, let's say I was mad at you for something, and I'm like, I just tell you, I'm like, I'm mad at you, and I'm angry, and I'm like, let's say I get a little loud. And for that time, it was good because it let me get my point of view across, and hopefully you understood it. But then after that, it's not on me. It's on you, like what you want to do with that information. And hanging on to it after I told you how I feel is not helpful. That's like a Stoic perspective on it, and which I tend to agree with, honestly.
Yeah. No, for sure.
You definitely have to draw like boundaries for yourself.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And yeah, man. So let's see. I'm trying to think of other questions on the fly here.
That's okay.
All right. So something that a lot of people probably don't know is we went to college together for similar career paths.
Yep.
And we're not there. We are not on that path anymore. We picked a new one.
Yeah.
All right. So, like, what kind of clicked in you when you were in college? Is like, I don't want to do this.
That's another tough one. Yeah, it was more about, I don't know, I don't think anything ever really clicked. It was so you know, I'll tell you, I went to college for social service work. Mm-hmm. And I guess it was more that I couldn't find a job in the field. Okay. So I just took one somewhere else in more of a construction field. Okay. And I've just kind of been working on it there, and I've just kind of slowly been getting out of the social service work. I don't want to say mindset, but sort of the idea that I'd be a social service worker. And eventually, so I'm out, like, you know, right now I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely not going to go back, because I'm not sure. I guess it just wasn't right.
Yeah, you know? No, and that's great, and like that's part of figuring yourself out, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, to be fair though, I don't regret taking the course at all, because it has really taught me how to diffuse situations and how to properly communicate while, how would I put it, properly communicate while trying to get my point across, right? But with the least amount of confusion.
Yeah, right? Yeah, be more now, clear cut.
I understand that sentence probably shows the opposite, but I've definitely been able to communicate better after that course.
That's awesome. And yeah, my experience with, well, I didn't even end up going into social work. I took some sort of like certificate program. Yeah. Just to feel out what I wanted to do, if I wanted to go into like social work, PSW, what have you. Mm-hmm. And yeah, the main thing I took away from it was there's a lot more to being considerate of someone else than just taking care of, like, putting food on the table, making sure there's a roof over their head. You know, you have to be in tune with what they want emotionally. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway I took, is the polarity between the physical and the metaphysical. But yeah, the reason I didn't follow through with it is because I didn't think I had the right personality.
Fair. Okay.
But I took it a little bit more like self-deprecating, I suppose, and where I said to myself, I don't think I'm strong enough to listen to these stories and see everything that happens.
Absolutely. Okay.
Right? And I remember sitting with my my guidance counselor at the time. Funny enough, she was a family friend.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And I was telling her, like, oh, I don't think, like, this is the right thing for me and stuff like that. And she brought up some good points. She's like, well, you might not have the skills now, but, like, by going through the program, you're going to learn the skills to cope with that situation.
Yes.
And I'm like, that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm still not going to go through with it.
Fair. All right. Fair.
Yeah, because, like, again, it hit me too. It's just like, this isn't for me. Because, like, deep down, I have a feeling where I'm going to start doing something you really shouldn't do as, like, let's say a counselor or a therapist. And that's like, somebody comes in and, you know, they're having a mental breakdown over, I don't know, something trivial. I can't think of anything right now. I feel like I'd go in my head, I'd be like, okay, but the person that came in before you was telling me that their husband died, and you're having an equal emotional reaction to, let's say, I don't know, your roommate stole or ate your lunch. You're having an equivalent reaction from that to someone's husband dying. And I'm like, and I feel like it wouldn't be fair to them. I'd be putting a judgment on them.
Right. Okay.
And yeah, and I think it's best that I didn't end up going through with social work, because when people are that in that state of fragility, they need an extremely nurturing person.
Okay. Yeah.
A person with almost limitless understanding. But again, the reason I think I gravitated towards social work in the first place was because I felt in a very fragile place myself. And I'm like, oh, I need that comforting guidance. Mm-hmm. And now I'm more like, listen, this is what you do. This is how you fix your problem. Mm-hmm. This is how you do it. So do it. You know? And yeah, that's our college stories. And we're both on new paths.
Yeah.
Just to put a nice little bow on it, at least from my perspective, I've realized too with like maybe school isn't even my setting.
Right.
Because I find that I'm doing a lot more learning now, just learning stuff from the internet and just watching these videos on YouTube on how to interview, how to edit, how to do all this stuff. And, you know, I didn't have to go to school, pay $3,000 for all this. Right. It's all available online. And that's another aspect to decision making that sometimes plays too much of a role is the cost of it.
Right.
Now, like, do you find that to be the case? Like, do you find like money factoring into your decision maybe more than it should be?
It obviously is a big factor, but
of course.
mean, yes. You know, I'll just say yes.
Yeah. I mean, you can't pay your rent and hugs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, what I find with that, it's just I find sometimes it plays like too much of a factor in my decision making. I guess that's more so where I was going with that kind of question. Like, do you find it plays too much of a role in your decision making, or like just the right amount?
I suppose just the right amount. I mean, I don't buy a lot of things.
Okay.
So it's not really a question of do I have enough to go out this? I mean, you know, especially during this time, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely that is one thing about the lockdown is it's really been better for my bank account. I mean,
100%.
Yeah. So I mean, definitely, especially now, like it's played less of a factor. But I mean, you know, obviously here and there, right? I mean, I'm trying to save up for a house, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, it's obviously a long process.
For sure.
Yeah, it's a long process, and I'm doing pretty well for myself, but it's still, it's still quite a bit.
It's crazy now because I think to get a down payment, it's probably going to be $60,000. Probably more.
It depends. It depends what you're looking for. So. I think it's something like either 5 or 10%. But if you do that, you have to get home buyer's insurance, I believe.
Right.
I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
But and then you need you need to put down 25% if you don't want to get that insurance.
Okay. Yeah, it's the first time I'm hearing about that.
Yeah.
Funny enough, my dream future home would be I need land for what I want to do, but realistically, it has nothing to do with the size of my house.
Okay.
Like, the house I'm in right now with my parents is the perfect size, but I want an Olympic-sized swimming pool.
Okay.
And I want a tennis court.
Okay. Sure.
Surrounded by trees.
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh. I'm not.
No.
Yeah,
It's pretty funny because when most people are like, "Oh, I need a lot of land to do what I want," they picture a big house.
Sure.
And for me, it's like, I want my little house, but I want my tennis court and I want to swim because, like, those are super fun physical activities for me.
Sure, okay.
And that I enjoy. And I realized that the other day. I'm like, I could probably, like, be outside all day just playing tennis.
Yeah.
And hitting the ball.
That's great.
You know? And, like, that in itself is its own form of, like, just being in the moment. Going, like, in with the flow. Mm-hmm. And, I get frustrated with myself too when I'm playing tennis.
Yeah.
And I like to consider myself a very calm person, but I'll get mad if I hit the ball. Mm-hmm. But I think that's because I know I can do better, you know? And like, that's cool. It's cool for me because I never really experienced anything like that.
Yeah.
But I never really tried to experience anything like that either. Like, younger, when I was younger, my hobbies were watching TV and playing video games.
Sure, yeah.
So, yeah, it's a learning process for me as well. And I think that's the way life should be, honestly. All right, friend, I think I took up enough of your time.
Yeah, okay.
Do you have anything to say before I let you go here?
Yeah, I've got a question for you.
Go ahead, man.
What was the most joyous experience in your life?
Oh, great question.
Yeah.
The most joyous experience in my life. Wow.
And you can't say sitting here with me.
Because it really isn't.
Oh! Shot through the heart. Oh, yeah.
The most joyous experience. Oh, you put me on the spot
Yeah,
on my
I
own
did.
show. Okay, a lot, man. Like, I find, for me personally, again, I have to do a little bit of soul searching for myself, but like, I find when I get into a relationship and I find a good relationship, that's a joyous experience to begin with, like in the moment. But then when I'm looking back at it retrospectively, I find myself thinking, I don't know, like analyzing it a bit. I don't think not to the point of killing the joy, but the reason I do that is to remember, like, there's a reason things didn't work out.
Right.
So I try to look back at my past experiences and remember the good times for what they were. Good times. I don't dwell on the good times.
Yeah.
But I always try and be like, okay, I got cheated on this relationship.
Oh yeah.
And I don't want that to happen again.
Yeah.
Right? Because it sent me spiraling, like hardcore.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was dissecting that and I realized, I'm like, well, the reason it hit me so hard was because that happened in the time of my life where I had literally nothing going on for myself. Like I said, playing video games, watching TV.
Right.
That doesn't constitute a life.
No.
You know? And then with my following girlfriend, I was analyzing that as well. And it was we had a good time. She was really sweet and stuff, but we ended up breaking up.
Right.
And then I realized I still took it pretty hard. But, you know, I didn't get to that spiraling point, which is great. But I also realized is like I still didn't have enough going on in my life to like keep the darkness away, I suppose.
Right.
Like I didn't have an internal structure set up for myself. Whereas now I feel like if anything were to happen in my current relationship, I would handle it a lot better, bordering on positive in terms of using it as an opportunity to learn. And that would hit me a lot quicker.
Wow, that's great.
Than before. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Actually, thank you for asking me that question because I forgot my last question.
Oh, what's your last? Okay.
Do you have anything that you do now that kind of puts you back in a joyous state or in a state of peace and harmony?
Honestly, whenever I do something that makes me feel accomplished. So say, you know what, going for a run, right? Just cleaning up around my place, right? Taking Miles for a walk, you know?
Sweetest dog ever.
Oh, he's great. Yeah, he's perfect. Yeah, anything that just makes me feel okay. I've accomplished something, right?
Yeah, like where you can just like kick your shoes off at the end of the day and be like, I had a good day.
Exactly.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Christian.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Man, I'm glad. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Don't be a stranger.
No, I won't. Yeah.
Thank you for everybody for listening today. And thank you for Christian for providing such an insightful conversation. If you like what you hear, please share this episode with all your friends, and I'll see you back in a few weeks.